Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I'm Taylor Rockwell. No Daryl Grove on today's program, so I've instead got two different friends to talk to. Up first is Alexi Lalas, returning to the show to discuss what to wear when doing commentary in the heat, what to expect for the upcoming World Cup qualifiers, and why Bruce Arena probably doesn't care what you think of his work. After that, I called my buddy Trey Janes to discuss the USA-Venezuela game, the USA-Venezuela senior game, the friendly game, not the U20 World Cup game. More on that later this week. In the meantime, we discussed his theory that the frustrations of being a Liverpool fan have prepared him for the frustrations of being a U.S. men's national team fan. It's a packed show, so let's get to it. Without further ado, here's Alexi. Joining me on the phone now, I've got Alexi Lalas. Alexi, thank you as ever for joining us.
Always a pleasure. How you doing? How's everything going?
Doing well. I always feel weird saying us because I'm used to Daryl being in the studio. Daryl's in England right now, so I'm still saying us even though it's just me. But otherwise, things are very good.
I was listening to your show the other day after Champions League. You were both in different places, but why did you get a different feed? I don't understand why you didn't watch the Fox feed. Was there a reason for that?
I think it's basically we cut the cords, so I could have done Fox like just with the rabbit ears, but it was just more convenient to watch it on my laptop. But have I offended you now?
No, I mean, look, we need all the ratings we can get, but don't worry, we got plenty of good ratings for that. So I can understand. You are forgiven. Go in peace.
I appreciate that. Although what I've learned since then is that it can be interesting to watch the Fox Soccer to Go feed because I learned that in the USA-Venezuela friendly when they didn't cut the feed at halftime, so I could hear Stu and JP talking back and forth. That was interesting.
Those are always fun, and that actually happens a lot nowadays with the the Wild West type of productions that we have. It happens on MLS at times, not as much now, but it's fun to hear what the people are saying. That's why you always have to be careful. I was reminded early on in my career when I was at ESPN that just assume that every mic is hot and recognize that everything that you say and do is being put up on that bird and is going all over the world, and act accordingly.
That's good. So you've never been burned by that sort of situation then?
No, not yet, knock on wood, but like I said, I gauge and understand that while I might say a joke when I'm riding home in the car with Rob Stone, it might not be appropriate, even though we are not on air and that red light isn't on, to say it. Not that it's a horrible thing or anything like that, but obviously there's different levels of stuff that what is suitable for people watching and what isn't. So
I gotcha. Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, JP and Stu didn't say it. It was mostly just all like, yeah, I got it, like talking to the producer. And I'm familiar with that because Daryl and I do the commentary for the USL team here in Richmond. And we've had a few of those where it'll be on TV here, but then the USL broadcast on YouTube starts like 5 minutes earlier. So there will be those moments of us just being like, hey, what number is he again? It's like, oh, no, that's not good. So now we mute. Now we always mute.
Well, it is interesting. It is a peek behind the curtain. And,
yeah.
And I get incredible response, actually, whenever I try to give people an idea of what's going on and kind of demystify what's happening. And people dig it, how a performance comes together and all that. So I think there is a value. The interesting thing in those instances is that people oftentimes don't know what's happening, and so you get right to the core and right to that raw type of stuff that's going on. It can get them in trouble, but it also can give you a glimpse into how it goes about, how the how it's made, if you will.
Actually, I do want to talk about soccer eventually, but I wanted to ask you, you tweeted a while back a photo of, I think it was you and John Strong both wearing shorts. Is that a thing that you all do fairly regularly when you're doing commentary?
Well, I like to say that on television, at least the television that I do, the only thing that matters is above the waist. And that's oftentimes all you will see are these two torsos when it comes to, the pregame or the halftime hit whenever we come on air, and there's actual pictures of us. And we're doing some games, especially through the summer because of MLS, and a lot of these places, I mean, it is really, really hot. And so, for example, the other day we were in Orlando. So, oftentimes we will wear shorts. You can't tell because we're being shot from the waist up, and so it looks like that we have our suits on. But there's a little. I hate to burst anybody's bubble, but I will say that we are wearing shorts. Okay, it's some people ask me as to is there any chance that we're not wearing anything? We are always wearing something. It might not be the actual suit pants. It might be shorts, but it's not as if I'm standing next to John Strong naked from the waist down.
Well, that burst that illusion for me. The other question then that begs the question: what's the footwear situation? Are we going sandals, or are you going like full loafers with dress socks still, just with shorts?
Oh no, there are no sandals. For those that follow me, know that when it comes to sandals, I think there are very few and very precise moments in life when sandals are acceptable. For example, I think it's ridiculous, and I think it should be against the law to wear sandals or open-toed shoes when you're traveling by air. So when you're going on an airplane or through an airport, I think it drives me nuts. I don't want to see it. I don't want it, and I certainly would never do it. And I think the same applies for a workplace, even though our workplace often moves and it's a little bit more unique and different than many workplaces. So no, I would never show up, even if we were doing the shorts thing, I would never show up and then double down with any type of open footwear, sandal-esque type of thing. No, absolutely not.
I know that you are a man of strong opinions. I hope that is the one that comes off the strongest on this show today. Is Alexi Lalas, sandals not in public. No, thank you. That's good. I'm glad we've got to the bottom of that one.
No, and specifically when traveling, I think it is. I think it's disgusting. And I know, look, I have this fight every time I tweet it out, and every time we have this conversation, people fight me on it, and you got to be comfortable, and the air travel has changed so much that they're not there. It's just a cattle call type of thing, and I get that. I understand that it's a pain. I understand that they do not do things to make it more comfortable for you, but I think that there are certain things that I just will not do, and I don't want people to do, and I think if you're traveling by air and you're going through an airport, you should have a shoe that covers your foot. And I believe that actually, from a safety perspective, the FAA would back me up on that. Now, they can't enforce it, but I believe that either just because it's pure decorum, and I believe that it's respectful, or if you want to go the safety angle, I think that I am justified in making this assertion.
So I feel like maybe the TSA should just throw out, it's not against the law to wear sandals, but maybe you'll get secondary screening if you're wearing sandals. That's all I'm saying. And then
Exactly. Buyer beware, right? I mean, you can do what you want, but recognize that you're setting yourself up for possible secondary screening.
On that note, I guess we should probably talk about some soccer. So I wanted to ask you quickly about the USA-Venezuela friendly. And mostly, I didn't actually I have some questions about what you thought about individual players and on-the-field performance. But I had a conversation back and forth with a person on Twitter because I was really frustrated that John Brooks was allowed to continue because it seemed to me like he was obviously injured. I didn't really understand why he would continue to play in a friendly. And I forget the person's name. I apologize. But they were saying, well, he doesn't want to Arena doesn't want to have a second goal or a third goal go in, and then he'll get all this pressure on him. And I don't know if I buy into that, but it did make me wonder. How much stake do you think Bruce Arena puts into these games? And do you feel like there is pressure on him if the USA loses a friendly? Does he care about the fan reaction, or is it more about as long as U.S. Soccer doesn't care, then he's good to go?
Oh, well, I mean, I can put to rest he doesn't care. Yeah,
okay.
I mean, he does not care.
All right.
And I completely agree with him, nor should he care.
Right.
I mean, we are knee-deep in some serious you-know-what, and I think he understands that, and he understands that does it matter? Yes, but this is a warm-up game for the game that matters. And ultimately, all I care about is that the 11 that he puts on the field against Trinidad and Tobago gets that 3 points. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have to get 3 points. It's not even a question. If they don't, it's a complete failure, especially because they are playing against Trinidad and Tobago. So whatever type of warm-up, and this is a warm-up both in terms of the game and the altitude, so it's a preparation for Denver, and then obviously moving on to Mexico City. So all of those different things are important. Having said that, I thought it was a pretty strong 11. You can argue as to the outdoor where he fits in and all that kind of stuff, but I thought it was a pretty strong 11. And given the 11, I think people were underwhelmed by the performance of the 11 and some individuals out there. But, I mean, I'm not going to get too riled up by a result that amounts to a glorified training game in preparation for the game that means the most thing. Just get the 3 points however you do it. I mean, this is no longer about development. This is no longer about aesthetics. This is no longer about philosophy of play or anything like that. This is simply about going to get 3 points. And I think Bruce Arena recognizes that his time is finite, and all that matters to him is getting the points in order to qualify for the World Cup and then doing something in the World Cup. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Are people up in arms about the Venezuela result? I mean, is that really a thing right now?
I mean, I think some people were frustrated just because it seemed like there were obvious not errors, but obvious problems that maybe have been consistent problems. So one thing we hear about a lot is Michael Bradley. A lot of people really don't like Michael Bradley. There it is. Always. Exactly. You got to get, obviously that's the first thing. And I personally think he didn't have his best game, but I also think that he's not helped. I don't think the system really suited him, and I think it ends up with him dropping in between the center backs. People seem to think that he's just doing that. I'm inclined to believe that that's something that he's been instructed to do to help facilitate passing, but then I think it leaves big gaps in the midfield that then you can't really fill, and you kind of have problems with possession after that.
Well, it's different if he's dropping into the center back position and then they are spreading out and basically coming out in three, as opposed to dropping in and doing things that the center backs can do anyway, and then, as you said, vacating that space and nobody. Rafa Marquez used to do a wonderful job of doing it, and so it takes a specific type of player, but it also takes a specific type of team to do that. Mm-hmm. Now, is he doing that because he just wants to get on the ball? That's all fine and well, but I hated when central midfielders would come back and take the ball off my foot or come back and basically do the exact same thing that I did. The whole point of having midfielders is that they can play between those lines, and they have an ability I never had, to be able to see what's behind them and to anticipate that pressure, and I can play them the ball and bypass one or two of the opposition, and then they get the ball, and they don't lose it. They turn, they connect, they do all that kind of stuff. I do not want my central defenders coming back and being center backs, basically, unless it's by design, and then you're coming out in three, and then you get the advantage of the outside guys getting up higher. So that's all of that is to say that I agree with you that Michael Bradley needs to play better. I have been a huge champion of Michael Bradley, and I still think that that Bruce Arena believes that he wants him on the field, and I do think that he needs to be in the 11. Having said that, Michael Bradley, he's not getting the benefit of the doubt from me anymore. He has got to bring it, and he has got to bring it starting next week against Trinidad and Tobago, and then when the team goes down to Mexico. But let's be honest. Next week, if the U.S. gets 3 points, that's fine. That's exactly what they should get out of the two games as I'm talking about. If they find a way to get 4 points, woo-wee, golden, right? We're sitting pretty. And my goodness, if they found a way where the soccer gods just said, all right, this is the day, and all the stars aligned, and they were able to come out of there with 6 points, and basically we're going to Russia. That's how I look at it. So just get the 3 points at home against a team like Trinidad and Tobago that you are better than, and then whatever happens in Mexico City happens, and then you're still along that pathway to qualify. But Michael Bradley has to play better, and it has to, I think, just be more consistent in the way that he is playing, and in that consistency, have that translate into the U.S. playing better as a whole. And you're right that hasn't always happened. It hasn't happened of late, and that's why people are a little bit irritated. Not a little bit. Some are very irritated.
Yeah. Well, so then it sounds like maybe you disagree with me a little bit, because my assumption is that he's doing it as part of a system that's what he's been instructed to do, but then it kind of limits his options once he drops in because people aren't filling that space that he's just vacated. So do you think it is intentional, or do you think it's just something that he kind of does naturally when he doesn't feel like he's getting the ball enough or when he thinks that things are slowing down?
I think that he is given the by Bruce Arena the freedom to do it. I'll have to ask Bruce when I get to, because I'm heading off to Denver, so I'm going to ask him actually if that is something that they've talked about. Bruce is also notorious for letting players figure it out and letting them do what they feel is right. Now, when Michael Bradley feels something is right, that's all fine and well, but if the other players don't feel that it's right, or once again, I get the feeling that when he comes back there, he then needs to pass it to Michael Bradley, but obviously Michael Bradley is no longer there.
Yeah.
So that's the problem. And I think we've finally gotten to a point now where Michael Bradley has pulled back into a more defensive type of positioning and role as a central midfielder, as opposed to this marauding number 10 that he was being forced into. But now it's almost as if he's gone too far. We got all excited, or at least I got all excited, because he finally pulled back into that position right in front of the back four that I think he's best at, and I think at times can be world-class at. But now he's continuing on back. So stop, Michael Bradley. Stop going backwards. Stay where at least I want you to be, and let's see how that goes. But I don't think that that this is something that they are necessarily saying you have to do, and certainly not that you have to do as much as he is doing. But I know he gets frustrated, as most midfielders do, and when they get frustrated, they pull deeper and deeper and deeper because they want to get on the ball, and they want to feel that they're getting on the ball and therefore contributing. And that just because you have the ball and just because you're getting on the ball as a midfield doesn't necessarily mean that you're contributing.
Gotcha. So you said earlier that you felt like maybe this Venezuela game was like almost sort of a glorified like training stint, that it was just kind of a way to get ready and a way to kind of figure out some stuff ahead of those World Cup qualifiers. So with that in mind, looking at the 11 that started, do you feel like that is roughly going to be the same 11 that's on the field against Trinidad, or do you think there will be some people who either played themselves out of contention or maybe were only there because other players weren't ready to go, looking specifically at, say, like Bobby Wood versus Josie Altidore?
Yeah, I think that's the one place that I would look. It is amazing that we're at the point. I mean, I guess it's a good point, and the person that's forced it really, I think, is Clint Dempsey coming back, and not just coming back, but being Clint Dempsey.
Yeah.
And so I think Bruce Arena has a good situation in that he's got players that are good. Now, the Dempsey Wood combination the other day didn't look great. And Josie Altidore, we know, is flying. He's healthy. He's scoring goals. He certainly has a case. And I think that's where I'll be interested to see. And maybe it's different for the different game. Obviously, the strategy and how you go about the game on Thursday against Trinidad and Tobago is very, very different than how you go about the Mexico City game, which we know is going to be much more of a defensive battle, and just because of the reality of who you're playing, where you're playing, and the history involved in that. And so I think that's the one thing that stands out for me. And I don't know what Bruce is going to come down on, which side he is going to come down on, what he thinks is better for a game against Trinidad and Tobago. Is it not starting a Josie Altidore?
Well, since I know you can't say exactly what Bruce is thinking, I don't want to ask you any more about that. But I do want to ask you, do you think Bruce Arena is going to play a back three?
Against Trinidad?
Yeah. Mostly I'm messing with you because I know I'm asking you just to interpret what you think Bruce Arena might do. But he did play in the second half. I know a lot of people were excited to see that. So do you think that's something that we might see either against Trinidad or against Mexico? I think I asked because, and I talked about this with a couple of different people, including Daryl, this idea that maybe he played the second half differently to prepare for that second game.
Yeah. I mean, look, everyone gets excited about a back three, but I mean, really, a back three oftentimes ends up being a back five, and then everybody goes, "Oh no, it's a back five." Oh, no. Because that, and it's just based on how far up those outside players are, or how much work they are able to do, and it's so nuanced that at one point it's this, oh my goodness, this is great. We're a back three, and we're pushing people forward. We're gonna flood the midfield and do all that. And then the other thing is, oh no, we're playing on the back five, and we're just going to bunker in, and we're really scared, and the spacing between the back five now is less space, so it's easy for them to cover and all that kind of stuff. So if they play a back three, I don't think they're playing a back three against Mexico. Okay, I think it's much more if it happens, then it's a back five, and it's batten down the hatches time, and just chew up as much time as you possibly can. Look for that counter if and when it comes. And I mean, I remember years ago when we were down at Azteca, and Charlie Davies got that goal on that wonderful counter, and it was just this free-forming recognition of that moment to go. And that's really, they're going to have to be really, really smart in the game in Azteca and pick and choose their moments to go, because let's be honest, they're probably not going to have a lot of the ball. But when they do have that ball, when they have their opportunities to break, Mexico will give that to them. And if that comes from a back five, then so be it. So the excitement of the back three might have to be tempered, because it might end up being a back five, which isn't the worst thing in the world.
So if you stick with the back four, then, in that kind of 4-1-3-2, which is what they went out with against Venezuela, the other player who I'm guessing will be a part of that attacking three, or the kind of attacking midfield three, is Fabian Johnson, who started on the right. Daryl and I disagreed about how effective he looked against Venezuela. I was far more negative than Daryl was. So I'm curious what your thoughts were, kind of generally speaking, on that Venezuela game for Fabian Johnson, and what you think he can bring to the table against both Trinidad or Mexico, or both.
Well, isn't this interesting that we've spent the last few years screaming and yelling and and pounding the table saying, put players in positions that they're comfortable, and obviously with Jurgen, the whole comfort zone thing and all of that. And now, at least on the surface, we put a guy actually in his comfort zone, in the place that so many people were screaming and yelling for him to play. And it was kind of type of situation. And it doesn't mean that he can't be good. You guys were disagreement as to one of you thought he played well and one of you didn't. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, basically, Daryl thought he was helpful in the attack. I thought he looked a little bit sloppy, and my concern was that he looked sloppy playing right midfield. He seems to be more comfortable playing like that kind of left attacking midfield. So I was speculating that there was a chance that maybe that might mean that Darlington Nagbe is either moved or has to sit because Bruce Arena wants to accommodate Fabian Johnson and get Fabian Johnson looking as good as he can. Daryl disagreed. Yeah. Daryl thought they would go with that kind of straightforward Darlington Nagbe, Christian Pulisic, and then Fabian Johnson on the right.
Yeah, I think they will too, because I think that there is a recognition of the value of Darlington Nagbe, and I know at times he's frustrating for people, but I love the fact that he just doesn't lose the ball.
Yep.
And that he is an outlet. Years ago, before you were born, back in the 1900s when I was running around, we had Tab Ramos, who congratulations, by the way, to him and his under 20s. I think it was successful, and I think he's given us a lot, possibly in terms of development for players to go on. But Tab Ramos was this guy. He was a man at a time, in that he was so good with the ball, and he was slumming basically playing with us in terms of his ability. But I knew every single time, even if we were getting just shellacked, I knew that if I got the ball and gave it to Tab, he would not lose it. Mm-hmm. Now, he might give it back to me and I might lose it, or somebody else, but he would not lose it. And the value of having somebody that consistently, regardless of the circumstances, 2 guys on him, 3 guys on him, being high-pressed on the side of the field or whatever, the value of having somebody like Darlington Nagbe, I don't think can be underestimated when you're talking about the national team. And that's why I think that Darlington Nagbe will continue to start. Now, do you want him to create more and do you want him to score more goals and do all that? Yes, but we don't have a lot of guys where the ball goes in and regardless of what the situation is, you're going to keep possession of that ball. And I think that's a good thing. And that's why I would argue that while Fabian might not be as comfortable or might not have shown as well on that right-hand side, that you're still playing on Thursday with the Darlington Nagbe out there, so he's not the one that goes to the bench. Neither does Fabian. I just don't think that you switch them over in order to accommodate the way you feel Fabian may be better served on the left-hand side of midfield.
Well, I think it's basically just I was surprised by how not sharp he looked, because he traditionally, I felt like he has been a good performer for the U.S. I feel like he has been one of those players who maybe loses the ball sometimes, but it tends to be because he's trying to get forward, trying to make something happen. And I was really surprised by just kind of how out of it he looked. He really didn't look very comfortable, and I wasn't sure if that was maybe just because he's tired and coming back from injury, or if it was because he's playing on that right-hand side, and so maybe just kind of wasn't really as ready to go as he might have been if he'd been on the left.
Well, would you rather him go and play left back and then put Dempsey back in the middle and put Pulisic out and Nagbe out, Pulisic and Nagbe on the other side? I mean,
nope.
Is he as uncomfortable on that right-hand side as he looked? Does it make you want him to go back to that left back position?
Not even a little bit. No.
Okay. All right. You're good at okay.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy with Jorge Villafana at left back, and I'm very happy, honestly, with DeAndre Yedlin at right back. I have not always been his biggest fan. Just there are a few little moments in that Venezuela game where I felt like you could see what the season under Rafa Benitez, playing consistently at Newcastle, has done for him in terms of confidence and just positioning. That I thought he looked sharper as well. So I'm more confident than I've been in a very long time in both of the U.S. Outside backs.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Cool.
I agree. Good. But now the final piece of that puzzle has to come to fruition.
Yep.
When you put Fabian Johnson, who I agree with you over the last couple of years has been probably the most consistent and best player for the national team. Now, when you put him in that midfield position, even if it's over on the right hand side, he has to contribute. Mm-hmm. And I like him there because I still want to keep Darlington Nagbe on the field.
Gotcha. So I do want to talk a little bit about the Gold Cup roster, but I wanted to ask, though, on a scale of like 1 to 10, heading into these World Cup qualifiers, like how confident are you that the U.S. will come out with at least 3 points? Are you feeling like we don't have so much to worry about? Are you still feeling like it's likely that the U.S. is going to qualify, or are you a little bit more nervous?
I'm not nervous.
Mm-hmm.
I think the U.S. will beat Trinidad without a problem on Thursday. And then whatever happens, like I said, against Mexico happens. Mexico's pretty, they're going through anyway. So if you drop points to Mexico, you're not losing somebody that you're going to be competing at. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm not nervous. I think that they will get the 3 points, and that will be fine. They will be well on their way to figuring out a way to get into that top 3 or that top 4.
So you're saying like 9 out of 10 we're going to Russia?
Let me just give you. I say at this point, it is for me, and this is just me.
Mm-hmm.
I have no mathematical or analytical data to back me up on this. So I think it's a 68.3% chance right now before we play the games this week. Now, if we get the 3 points against Trinidad and Tobago, it jumps up into the 70s for me.
I've often heard that like 78% of statistics are made up on the spot.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. Nice. So before,
with all due respect to Pablo Mastroianni, I'm sure he's not going to enjoy the fact that I'm throwing out statistics here and analytics when it comes to the chances here. But I kid, Pablo. I know you're listening. It's okay. Relax.
Yeah, I'm sure he's listening. We get emails from him all the time. But I wanted to ask about the Gold Cup roster as well. Are there any names on there? I know there's a fair few surprises. I think it's one of the more exciting, at least provisional rosters we've seen in a while in terms of the Gold Cup. Are there names on there that you're particularly excited to see, or are there any names on there that you think we might not end up seeing? Obviously we won't see 17 of them, but yeah.
Right, yeah. So I think that actually, okay, so I'm looking through the thing. So Joe Bendik, I think, has been a really interesting type of coming out party for him, if you will. He's been very, very good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he is the next national team goalkeeper. But I think it's deserved, and I'll be interested to see. The Jesse Gonzalez story is always interesting, how that all plays out, and if he is a viable option, or is this just us protecting, and hoarding players. When it comes to the guys in the back, let's see here. Not a lot of surprise. Well, Polster, that Chicago Fire team is doing really well. And then a bunch of usual suspects. Jonathan Spector, I think, has been probably, in my estimation, one of the, if not the biggest and best signing. And even Jason Kreis, I talked to him a couple of weeks ago, and he didn't think that Jonathan Spector was going to be as essential to that Orlando success as it's been. So maybe he comes back in out of the wilderness. The Christian Roldan, he's on there, right?
He is indeed.
The forward. So I'll be interested to see if he makes it, because he's been talked about, and he's another one who can play, I think, for 3 different national teams. So if they see him as a possibility, the Kellen Rowe thing, he's always been around, and he's part of this whole generation of really kind of creative and technical midfielders that don't really play a position, which is okay, because at times they're exciting, but at some point you got to play a position, and where does he fit in, or does he fit in? Mm-hmm. And then up top, did what's his name from Minnesota get called? Christian Ramirez?
He did not.
No. Didn't. So that's disappointing. I think you got a guy that's scoring goals. There's nothing more important and valuable than scoring goals. Yep. Although the Dom Dwyer experiment, I think we will see that this summer, because you gotta, if you're Bruce Arena, this is a guy who consistently has scored goals now, and this is not a spring chicken. This is a guy who's been around. He understands what the game is about. So if Dom Dwyer is a viable option, Bruce Arena has to figure it out this summer. And so if he comes through and provides a different look up there, because we were talking about Clint Dempsey and Bobby Wood and Josie Altidore, Dom Dwyer is a very different type of player. And so if you can add him to the arsenal and you say, yeah, this is interesting, whether it's starting or a guy coming off the bench that brings a different look, that would be valuable to Brewster Arena. But you got to do it this summer, so you have to see this summer. There will be some players this summer that we see in the Gold Cup for the U.S. that do make the team next summer. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I'd be all right with that. There's definitely a few in there that I'm pretty excited about. You've named a couple of them.
Who are you excited about?
I think Kenny Saif is one. I talked to Daryl about this, that like I don't really know anything about him, like at least in terms of I haven't seen him in a game. I've read so much about him in like the past 2 years, just about how he is eligible, but he'll probably never play for the U.S., but he's this exciting player who plays in the Champions League. He's a consistent player, that he would be kind of like right away. He'd be challenging players for some starting spots. So I'm really just interested to see him in the flesh if he does make that squad. Yep. Apparently he has fouled his one-time switch from what I've read and heard, so we'll see what he makes. And then the Jesse Gonzalez one I was pretty shocked by. That was the one where at halftime when Stu and JP were talking to the producers, the question, I think he was asked, "Are you ready to go?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm just trying to work on the pronunciation of Jesse." So that was where I was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? But yeah, I guess I really thought that it was a done deal. He was playing for Mexico, so I was very surprised to see that had changed, and I'm curious to see if more comes out about why that situation has changed.
Yep. If he saw the writing on the wall, or what from an American standpoint from the U.S. team, how they went about it. I don't know. And the Saeed thing, I mean, look, a lot of times when there's players that aren't playing in huge leagues and we don't get to see them consistently, is he someone that will come in and will immediately be able to, like you said, challenge and live up to this, the mythology, if you will, or is he a mixed disc route? I mean, Mix benefited from the fact that he was kind of out of sight, out of mind, and so we just heard tales of Mix, and nobody actually, well, not nobody, there were some people that actually watched him consistently, and then it just didn't translate. So cautiously optimistic about him because, like you said, he has been successful and he is playing consistently. So, but it also wouldn't surprise me in the least if he comes over and everybody says, "Well, that's all fine and well, but he's not any better than anything that exists already."
I do need to let you go because I know you've given me plenty of time and I appreciate that. But is it wrong to feel bad for Mixed Discarud that he really has become sort of the cautionary tale, that he's being used as like, well, you never want to be a Mixed Discarud? Like, I hope in my life no one is ever saying that, like, oh, you never want to be a Taylor Rockwell, like, unless maybe it's a good thing. But I just feel sort of bad for him that it seems like it's all kind of gone off the rails.
I don't think Mix is, and while I brought him up as an example, I don't think that he is we're using him as a punching bag or anything like that. And oftentimes people will ask me about should we feel bad for Freddie Adu? And my answer is no. I mean, look at the opportunities that these guys have had, and look, it's not that they're horrible players or anything like that, but I think in both of those cases, the hype and as I said, the illusion that we had of what they were and the reality of what they came to be, and the reality in different situations, because you can be a player in one environment, and when you change that environment, you can be a very different player. The best players are able to, regardless of environment, deal with it on and off the field and still be really, really good. And that Mix, it didn't translate to MLS and it didn't translate to NYCFC. It doesn't mean he's a bad player. And no, you shouldn't feel bad for him. He's had incredible opportunities. He gets to be one of the 0.0001 of the population that gets to be a professional athlete, and people pay him to do it. And he has continued to get opportunities, even though it didn't work out in NYCFC. So no, you shouldn't feel bad for him. And I don't think that we are being unfair / mean by bringing up the cautionary tales of a Mixed Discarud or of a Freddie Adu. It's okay. They're going to be just fine.
All right. I appreciate that. So we've gotten your rules for travel. We've gotten your rules for broadcasting and staying comfortable. We've gotten your opinion on the U.S. national team, and you've talked me out of feeling bad about Mixed Discarud. So really, it's been a very productive conversation.
Exactly. I got it all figured out here. I mean, I have plenty of rules, but as I tell you each and every time, I enjoy talking to you guys. You guys do a wonderful job. I enjoy talking to everybody and debating and discussing. And many people, as you know, disagree with me, and that's part of my job, and that's part of what I love about the soccer community, is we have all these different ideas of how it should look on and off the field, and we come together and we discuss them and we debate them and we argue them, and it's okay. And I got respect for people, whether they agree with me or disagree with me, and I hope that they have a respect for me. I never say don't take it personally because, and I think I've told you this before, we are all human beings here, and so everything is personal, and that's okay. It's all right to be personal, but you can be critical and you can be personal while still being respectful of the person and of the person's differing and opposing at times opinions that they have. And that's one of the things I love about the soccer community.
I like it. And I'd say that's a fitting note to end on. So thank you very much, Alexi, again for taking the time. And I'm sure we will talk to you again in the near future.
Sounds good.
So thank you, as always, to Alexi Lalas. He always makes time to come on the show, and he's always an interesting interview. We very much appreciate that, especially given his strong feelings regarding sandals on a plane. Up next, here's my conversation with Trey Janes. We went to college together and played soccer together in the sense that he actually played soccer while I sat on the bench and clapped. But before we get to Trey, a quick update about the schedule for the rest of the week. I think we're going to have Daryl on maybe to do a quick review of the USA TNT, Trinidad and Tobago World Cup qualifier, but we're also going to have a couple other interviews with folks like Brian Sciaretta and Jeff Carlisle to both preview and review those games. Hopefully Matt Doyle and maybe Tom Marshall on to preview and review the USA-Mexico game as well. So it's going to be a packed week and maybe early next week as well. So, keep your ears open. But until then, here's Trey Janes. Joining me now, I've got my buddy Trey. Trey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Taylor. Thanks for having me on.
I like the very neutral diplomatic voice. It's a good voice for a sports podcast.
Well, it's better than the voice that I've probably used with you in the past.
I think, if past is precedent, then it's probably a little bit slurred for both of us, would be my guess. after several rounds, and then the debating about soccer tends to begin. But yeah, not this time. But I wanted to talk to you mostly because Daryl is out of town, which means I need soccer friendship, and you came to mind, so here we are. But also because I know you're a U.S. fan, maybe we can talk a little bit of Liverpool as well. But yeah, I wanted to talk to you about USA because I was a little bit negative coming out of the Venezuela game. Daryl was a little more positive. So I'm looking for to see where the bar is for everybody else. So how did you feel about that USA-Venezuela game?
Well, it's funny that you first off mentioned Liverpool, and then also that you had a little bit negative and Daryl had a little bit positive, because that is exactly what the first half reminded me of, was Liverpool. And I mean that in both the good and bad ways.
Really?
Yeah, because it seemed to me the possession was there, the intent to attack was there, and then nothing could really develop in the final third. And then, of course, the goal, which came off of a set piece, especially a second ball off a set piece, also reminded me of Liverpool. And it just looked like concentration was lost for just a half second, and then they conceded. So that was my mindset going into halftime.
So let me ask you this then, or did I still remind you of Liverpool in the second half then, or does that change?
More so in the first half.
I gotcha. All right.
Yeah, that's when to halftime. That's exactly what I was thinking of. It just reminded me so much of watching games against lower competition.
That's funny, because I guess in my mind I have this idea of Liverpool having a successful season, making top four, playing exciting soccer, Sadio Mane doing things, Coutinho doing things, Jurgen Klopp grinning on the sidelines. So is that not accurate? Is that more like the outsider's perspective of I see the highlights and I hear my friends talk about Liverpool, but maybe I don't see them enough to know that they're pretty frustrating?
Maybe. And I think it's especially because, and when I say it reminded me of them, it was against the lower teams who like to sit back, kind of like Venezuela did. And they were just sort of daring you to attack, and then we're gonna come at you when we have a chance to counter and hope that there's a mistake in the defense somewhere, and that's sort of what it felt like.
And is it does that make it enjoyable? Because I'm assuming you enjoy watching Liverpool, but maybe just not against lower tier opposition. But did you find it enjoyable to watch this game? Were you able to get into it, or was it just kind of frustrating for at least the first 45?
Oh, it was definitely enjoyable, and mostly because it being a friendly, there's no real ramification to whatever the result might be. But and you get to see some new faces here and there, or some ones that you've only seen a couple times before, but. It was just very reminiscent of what Liverpool would do with teams who they were expected to beat, but just always seem to have a way to sort of trip themselves up.
So when Daryl and I watch friendlies, like, it can be a little bit confusing, I guess, because with that, we always try to kind of build, like, is there a narrative building towards a tournament? And we're always kind of watching it with that in mind. We're also trying to figure out, like, what the coach is doing tactically, because then that informs how we're going to talk about, like, the competitive games they're going to play. Is that the same for you? Like,
Sure.
how are you watching games? Are you watching them in a bar? Are you watching them at home? Are you, like, trying to figure out what's going on tactically? Or is it more like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I'm really excited to see that guy. Is it more casual, or is it still a pretty serious observation for you?
I'm almost always watching at home. Not necessarily as an overly critical analyst or anything like that, but I do try and watch games even a second and third time, which I imagine you guys probably do a lot too.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see it that way. And I actually had to watch the Venezuela game yesterday morning as opposed to live, so I already knew the score, but that allowed me to take a step back and get a bigger picture of what was happening on the field as opposed to, just rooting for the U.S.
That's funny. I mean, I don't think I would do that if we weren't doing the show, if I'm being perfectly honest. And Daryl does that. He loves doing that. He loves knowing the score before we watch the games. So sometimes, like, we'll have soccer and we'll have to miss the first half. And he has no problem, like, knowing the score, knowing what's going on, because I think it allows him to relax a little bit more and then just kind of pay attention to what's going on off the ball. For me, it takes away a little bit of the drama. Maybe I'm just not, like, a scholar of the game the way you two gentlemen might be.
Oh, I don't know about that, but I will. It's interesting to me, and I'll try and watch it with a level head if I can sometimes, even if it's after the fact. But don't get me wrong, I will still wake up at odd hours of the morning to catch a game that I really want to see, even if it means I only get a few hours of sleep.
I'm definitely familiar with that. The U20 World Cup has not been helpful in getting consistent sleep. But are there players?
No, it hasn't.
So with you, then, are there players, like, on this team? Are there things that you specifically enjoyed coming out of the Venezuela game? Are there things that made you optimistic or excited for those World Cup qualifiers? Or was it just kind of like, all right, it's a friendly, it was good to see some faces, but we'll see what happens on Thursday and Sunday?
Yeah, there were a couple. I will admit I have not seen a whole lot of Jorge Villafaña before today. I thought he was really impressive, and I want him to nail down that left back spot if he hasn't already. Now that DeMarcus Beasley, I would imagine, is finally almost out of the picture, all love to him. He's a great servant, but it's about that time for someone else to step up, and I want him to be able to do that.
First of all, DeMarcus Beasley is never retiring, just so you know that. He will be like 65 and still playing.
Yeah, maybe he can tell us where that fountain of youth is. But
yeah, right?
I thought Tim Howard did a great job in the first half especially. I mean, there was a 90-second span where he pulled off a couple crazy saves, and we could have, easily walked into the locker room 3-0 down. Mm-hmm. And, Pulisic continues to impress. He obviously got the tying goal and had a couple glimpses of really neat moments, especially there was one with Dempsey where they did like 3 1-2s back to back to back. That was fun to watch.
He's pretty decent. I've heard he's decent.
Yeah, he's not too bad.
And are there any players that you don't necessarily enjoy, or like maybe that aren't in this team that you're okay with not being in this team, or overall do you pretty much like the players that Arena seems to be considering?
I like most of what he's done so far, at least from what I've seen. It definitely seems like some of the old guard is starting to take a back seat a little bit, and I know it's just a friendly and not everyone's going to get into the team for one game, but he's, you see the recent call-up roster, and there's just a lot of young players, a lot of like homegrown MLS club players that are getting into, at least getting a bigger look. And I'm hopeful for the future, I guess.
I got you. And like looking, like just from stepping back from the team itself, though. So you're in Lexington, Kentucky right now. When last I was there, I mean, there was like interest in soccer at like the youth level. I don't know how much there was in terms of like watching games, really like getting like mass viewing for soccer. What is the soccer culture like there, and how does it compare to say like Louisville, where you have Louisville City, the USL club, and it seems like there's a decent amount of interest there?
Sure. Louisville is more or less twice as big as Lexington, so the culture is definitely more popular there. But I will say, in the 10 or so years I've been in Lexington, it has grown immensely. There are restaurants and bars that alter their hours for early morning Saturday Premier League games. They will have viewing parties when the U.S. is playing an important game, things like that, and it usually packs the place. So while it's still, you think of Lexington, you think of horses and UK basketball and bourbon.
Yep, pretty much.
Yep, but it's becoming more of a thing, certainly. And I work with a lot of people who would say the same and who are starting to get into it more.
I mean, you certainly have to get less dressed up to watch soccer than you do, say, horse racing.
Yes, you do indeed.
Do you still wear the big hats? I know that used to be your thing.
Oh, that wasn't my thing, but that is definitely a thing.
Do you ever watch with any of like the other Lexington folk, or are you guys all off, doing your own things, being married and having kids? I know kids are not your thing at the moment, but I know for other people they are.
Yeah, occasionally, and there's quite a few friends of mine that are around town who, when we can, we'll try and make it an event, especially if it's something big, Champions League, or, once every 4 years with the World Cup or Gold Cup, anything like that.
There's like only a few things that I miss in particular about living in Kentucky. Obviously, I miss you. I will say I miss our friend Todd Davis, only because of the kind of angry Arsenal fandom and the sarcastic comments that usually came with soccer games. That always made it a particularly enjoyable experience.
Oh yes, yeah. Todd is alive and well, and he's still an angry Arsenal fan. So you have to know that.
I'm glad to know that Todd is alive. That's good. That's always exciting to hear.
I'm just sorry that you missed the peak of Todd angerness.
What was that?
Just after the way they finished.
He wasn't thrilled?
I don't think so.
So then, so looking at the World Cup qualifiers, then, what are your expectations? Are you nervous? How are you feeling?
Cautiously optimistic is probably the best way to put it.
You're being very diplomatic, I feel like.
That is the most neutral answer in the world, I know that. But I can't picture a scenario in my head where they don't get over the line.
Mm-hmm.
I really can't. And so I'm happy with how they played against Venezuela. I think it was good. I know you could probably hear this over the Fox Soccer commentary, how they were sort of ramping up, quite literally, the altitude friendlies, and then into the next two games. That'll be in Denver and then Mexico City. So it's cautiously optimistic. So I'm not expecting us to beat Mexico and Mexico City. I'm not saying that, but I think we'll get a result in Denver, and then I think we'll get enough points to finish and get over that line.
I feel like there was that long pause there for a moment, was like the debate of whether or not to say like, yeah, I think we're in trouble, or if it was just sort of like really trying to decide if cautiously optimistic was the terminology you wanted to opt
Well,
with.
I was trying to figure out if I should say, yeah, we're going to get a result in Mexico City, even though that has happened, once?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, you can always go bold, but so you only watched the senior team against Venezuela. I have to say that because the U20s throws me off completely. So you only watched that friendly against Venezuela once, is that correct?
Yes.
But if you sometimes are watching games multiple times, and I'm assuming that means you're generally watching with a tactical eye. So are there things that you saw in that game, like from a tactical approach, that you thought either worked well, or were there things that you sort of thought could be maybe problematic going up against Trinidad and Mexico?
Well, I liked the fullbacks, both Yedlin and Villafania. They seem like they are. I know Yedlin has been kind of a point of contention with a lot of U.S. fans, but I love that he's working under Rafa at Newcastle, who is a very defensive-minded coach.
Of course, you love that he's with Rafa.
Of course I do. You knew that I was going to say that.
Yeah.
But they did their duties. They attacked well. They looked dangerous at times. And it was almost like a 4-1-2-3 at times that was interesting to me. And then, of course, they changed it to a 3-5-2, which I was a little bit more hesitant about.
Why is that?
When you consider what happened when Klinsmann did that against Mexico.
Yeah,
so I was just curious about that more than anything else.
Yeah, because I was wondering the same thing, because Klinsmann did it, and then I guess a lot of the coverage afterwards, it seems like indicated that maybe he hadn't experimented much with that in training or at all in training. So I am kind of curious if Arena had worked on that, if that was something he was planning to roll out. Because Daryl's theory is that maybe it points to the first half is what he plans to do against Trinidad, and the second half is maybe what he plans to do against Mexico. But I feel like it's unlikely we see that back three, but it did seem like it was something they'd worked on.
Yeah, I guess it did, and it worked just fine. So I guess it didn't seem like it was just a random switch. It definitely seemed like it was something in mind for games to come. So
with those friendlies, with the World Cup qualifiers, so Thursday, are you working? Are you watching on delay, or are you gonna try to make time?
I will be able to watch that one live, I think.
All right, and then is that Home Alone with like all the lights off and in steadied silence?
Oh yes, clutching my scarf and pillow.
Nice. And the Mexico game as well? Are you going to be able to catch that one live?
I think so.
All right, lovely. Well, if Daryl is unavailable, maybe you could work on your English accent and do your a serviceable job as a replacement while he's gone. But until then, Trey, thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, appreciate you. Take care.